Just to give a quick introduction, company is called Green Story. My name is Akhil. I'm one of the co-founders and the president of Green Story. What Green Story is a B2B sustainability platform that helps companies measure, offset, and improve their environmental footprint for fashion brands at the product level. Next slide, please. So this webinar is going to be focused on, is the first of our expert webinar series for February for this year. And we're very pleased to host Dr. Muthu for that, who's our Chief Sustainability Officer, and is focused on ensuring accurate product for environmental impact measurement that's in compliance with anti-greenwashing legislation. We will also be looking at a little bit around around LCAs at scale. See, there's a bit of background noise.
Yeah, there's a background noise
Folks,
from someone. I'm not sure from whom it's coming.
folks, could you please all mute yourself if you're joining the call? That'll be super helpful. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone. So once again, just to give a quick intro to Green Story, we work with 150 brands worldwide, and we focus on bridging sustainability gap by combining lifecycle assessment methodology with interactive data and our carbon offset platform, as well as a platform for visualizing the impact at point of sale to consumers. And the idea is to enrich the customer experience and enhance brand transparency and increase loyalty and revenue. Hey guys, I think there's a lot of folks who are unmuted at this point. Can you please mute yourself?
Akhil, I can hear everyone else is speaking.
Yeah, no worries. I think I muted them. No, sorry about that, folks.
No problem.
Can you go to the next slide, please, Dr. Muthu? Excellent. So just to give a brief introduction to Dr. Muthu, he's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Green Story, and he's widely regarded as the foremost expert in textile lifecycle assessment, LCA. He's got a PhD in this space as well. And previously, he was head of sustainability at SGT Group in Hong Kong and is the ex-head of the Environmental Services Division in Asia of SCS, which is also an LCA and sustainability consulting company. He's a he's a textile technologist who is synonymous with LCA in this space after having published over 150 scientific books on the subject and over 120 research articles. I could go on and on. I had to from 4 pages. So here we are with somebody who's had 12 years of experience in the space and is really well regarded. And we're very honored to have him here today. So it's all yours, Dr. Muthu.
Thank you so much, Akhil. Thank you, everyone, for attending our today's webinar. So again, still I can hear a lot of background noise from you folks. Can you please kindly mute from your side, so thereby people can hear what I'm going to speak. Thank you, folks. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about first I'm going to begin with key environmental impacts one can consider in terms of LCA. I know there are a few folks who have thorough knowledge on LCA, but I can see from the list of registrants there are a few folks who are just starting in LCA, and I also received a lot of requests from a lot of attendees to talk about basics of LCA. So just to cater to the needs of everyone, I'm going to touch upon few environmental impact categories and what do they mean, in very simple words. With that, I'm going to talk about what all the different methods to measure the product level impacts. And with that, let's talk about how can you get started on your impact measurement journey, which is the crux of today's webinar, one of the crux of today's webinar. With that, we'll also talk about future proofing impact calculations. And one of the biggest stakes, rather hassles with textile LCAs or any LCAs for that matter is how can we scale these LCAs? It's not a big deal to do 10 LCAs for a brand, but how can we do 100 LCAs, 1000 LCAs, 10,000 LCAs, and some brands are having a requirement of 30,000 pieces. They have to get LCAs done within a short span of time. How are we going to achieve this? And we have innovated ways to do that. So let's talk about that very quickly. With that, I will aim to talk about what is greenwashing, what all the various issues revolving around this main topic called greenwashing, and what all the various regulations and how can one be prepared to face these greenwashing regulations. And very importantly, how can you be prepared to face the regulations, and how can you prepare yourself to be compliant with regulation. So these are the topics with which I'm going to disseminate the information pertaining to the topic which we have chosen for today's webinar. All right. So with this, quick introduction about what I'm going to speak in terms of agenda, I'm going to talk about, to begin with, what are the key environmental impact metrics one can consider in terms of LCA. See, in the sphere of sustainability, key environmental impact indicators, what we mean is they are metrics which are used to measure and track the state of environmental impacts, and also to assess the progress towards the goals one sets in terms of sustainability. So some key examples of some common examples of key environmental indicators in the sphere of LCA include global warming potential, blue water consumption, energy demand. Of course, there is a wide array of impacts one can cover with LCA, including freshwater ecotoxicity, terrestrial ecotoxicity, human toxicity, marine ecotoxicity, freshwater eutrophication, terrestrial acidification, and so on. The list goes on. But I want to talk about few impact indicators and what do they mean. So one of the well-known and one of the common indicators in LCA studies is the GWP, which is global warming potential. So I'm sure all of you know about carbon footprint, global warming potential, they are synonymous. It's a metric used to quantify the total warming effect of a given substance relative to carbon dioxide, which is considered as a reference gas over a specific or specified period of time. That's how we define GWP. Then we talk about BWC, blue water consumption, which is absolutely different from water footprint. So don't get confused with these two. In blue water consumption, what we term is, it refers to the use of surface water. When I say surface water, I refer to rivers, lakes, reservoirs for domestic agriculture and industrial purposes. And you have to make a note of it. It's one of the key indicators of water sustainability from the surface water sources for human use. This is what we try to measure in terms of BWC. Then we go to the third important indicator called energy demand. We call it as PED, primary energy demand. This is an impact indicator which is referring to the amount of energy that could be consumed in a given situation under certain conditions and assumptions. I would say it's an estimate of the maximum energy demand that could occur given the available resources and infrastructure. So, it is calculated based on various factors such as population growth, economic development, technological advancements, energy efficiency measures. It also takes into account the current energy consumption pattern, trends, as well as the future projections and potential changes in energy use behavior. That's what we are going to cover with the LCA study. And there are a lot of other indicators, as I said. Due to want of time, I just reserved to talk about these three primary indicators. With that, let me just move to the next slide. So the next topic I'm going to cover is product environmental impacts and how can you measure. So with LCA, you can measure impacts from a product as well as from a process. So we call this as process LCA and product LCA. Here, I'm going to confine my discussions pertaining only to product environmental impacts, which is product level impacts. So product environmental impacts can vary, of course, depending on the specific product and the production methods deployed. To assess the environmental impact of a product, various methods and tools can be used, including LCA, which is a comprehensive and a standardized method that looks at all the stages of your product life cycle from, let's say, raw material extraction, manufacturing process, transportation and distribution, consumer use and disposal. And again, there are a lot of variants, covered by LCA. One can measure the impacts from cradle to gate, or you can, extrapolate the impacts till the grave stage. And again, at the grave stage, if you are closing the loop with the closed loop recycling, then this is termed as cradle to cradle. So this is a very comprehensive approach. And here there are umpty numbers of impact indicators as I mentioned in the beginning. So next, environmental footprinting, which is exactly similar to LCA, but in LCA we measure a long list of impact indicators. In environmental footprinting, the distinction comes here. This method rather focuses only on a smaller set of environmental impacts vis-a-vis LCA, where we take a long list of impact indicators. Maybe in environmental footprinting, one can measure, let's say, greenhouse gas emissions, water use in terms of water footprint, or let's say land use, or any other specific impact indicator. Third one, carbon or water footprint. This is very specific. We don't again measure few indicators. We target only a specific indicator, let's say carbon. Carbon footprint. Here, there is a earmark standard. See, when I was doing a PhD in 2008, we didn't have so many distinctive standards. We always have to use ISO 140/44 to measure be what carbon footprint or water footprint. We measure the impacts to the same standard. But with the advent of a lot of standards today, thanks to the committee members who have toiled themselves to prepare all these standards. We have a earmark standard for carbon footprint, which is ISO 14067. Same is the case with water footprint. In terms of this specific footprinting, let's say a specific type of environmental footprinting, which is earmarked, that focuses solely, let's say if it is carbon footprint, that focuses solely on the carbon, rather greenhouse gas emissions generated by a product in its entire life cycle. Same is the case for the water footprint. Here, one point you need to understand is, okay, in terms of order of decreasing complexity and depth, LCA is at the peak, followed by environmental footprinting, followed by carbon or water footprinting. So this is what one has to understand in terms of what all the environmental impact measurement methods which are available based on the product life cycle scheme. Right. So now let's talk about how can you get started on your impact measurement journey. See, I've been in the space for more than a decade, and I did work with various scales of requirements from brands, manufacturers, customers. One of the peculiar cases is that, okay, I'm yet to start, Dr. Muthu. I want to do my sustainability journey. I want to measure my, let's say, product level impacts. What can I do? The other scenarios would be, okay, we have already started doing measuring at the process level, or just we have done performed few environmental audits, chemical audits, but we are yet to start with product level, or we have done for few products. What can I do for the rest of my products? So these are the common scenarios one typically faces, and I have faced in umpteen numbers of cases since, because I'm in the space since 2011, as I can mention. So my piece of advice for anyone who is planning to start your impact measurement journey is, I'm going to start giving step-by-step approach. So I have defined 7 steps. Of course, it's not a hard and fast tool, but according to my experience, I would like to define these 7 steps. One can follow to get started with your impact measurement journey. The first step is, in terms of LC, defining the scope. When I say scope, determine which products, which processes, and which activities you want to cover in terms of your environmental footprinting or product level environmental footprinting technique. When I say scope, okay, you can think of, am I going to assess my product level impacts from cradle to gate? Just stop the measurement till the manufacturing gate, or am I going to take into account of how my consumer, how my end user uses my product, how long they use it, how do they dispose, and what is a reflection of all these aspects in terms of impacts. So as I mentioned before, there are a lot of variants: gate to gate, cradle to gate, cradle to grave, cradle to cradle. So this is what we talk about in terms of scope. And again, there are a lot of jargons. I really want to reserve all those, like function unit, reference flow. What are my assumptions going to be? What sort of scope I'm limiting to? What processes I'm going to include? A lot of things. Am I going to include packaging? Am I going to follow which method, cutoff? So there are, how am I going to allocate the impacts, burdens? So there are umpteen numbers of considerations will fit into the first step, which is defining the scope. Here we talk about system boundary, purpose of the study, availability of data. Am I going to use primary data, secondary data? And very importantly, what is the relevance to stakeholders from this study, which is very important, and the time frame. So these are the aspects one has to consider in terms of the scope. Let's move on to the next stage, which is very interesting, which is establishing goals and objectives. And in this phase, clearly define what the organization or what the commissioner wants to achieve through the entire measurement process. Let's say, such as, okay, I'm measuring my GHG emissions via carbon footprint with 14067 from cradle to gate. So what am I going to do? Am I going to alleviate the footprints? Let's say next year, am I going to linger around short-term goals, medium term, or long term? Am I going to completely make it to renewable sources? Am I going to make it neutral? So, or am I going to do what? Am I going to just comply with regulations? So we have to, set the clear goals and objectives at this stage. Then we talk about the third stage. Here, we are going to select an appropriate measurement method for measuring. We talked about three methods. Are we going to take LCA method with 14040/44, or am I going to confine only to the carbon footprint? So in that case, I'll just go with only 14067. Or am I going to do only water footprint? Or am I just going to go with LCA? But even with LCA, you can earmark what impact indicators are of interest. Again, from the scoping point of view, from the first stage. Then we go to the fourth step, which is the which is one of the complex steps, which is data gathering. We call it as inventory analysis. So LCA is all about input output method. So we have to collect inventory data. That means we have to collect data pertaining to the life cycle phases defined for our measurement in terms of, let's say, energy consumption, water consumption, waste production, what is the material use, what is the chemical use, raw material usage, and different other aspects which are pertaining to the study and its scope. I've just made a interchangeable arrow mark between 3 and 4. Sometimes with my experience, I have seen. Let me share a few experiences. After we define the scope, after we define goals and objectives, after we earmarked indicators, after we were present on site and collect all the data, and once we start collecting the data on site, as well as when we start doing analysis, sometimes we have altered the indicators. Let me tell you an example. I was in one of the factories in Turkey a few years before. So where we have seen there was one spray which was used. So just I had a doubt about what is the impact of that spray. So once we start analyzing, we found out that that spray has a very significant impact, and that will hit one of the very important indicators. So then I just advised the customer who has asked us to commission the study, told them that, hey, look, there is going to be a potential impact coming from only this part of the uh, uh, of this part of the inventory, which is eventually coming from this spray. So can we include one of the indicators? So this is also possible, but again, that comes from the expertise and the experience of the LCA practitioner, and again, subject knowledge. The practitioner has to be subject matter expert to understand what could be the relevance of impacts going to come from a very peculiar or minute part from the inventory. So what I want to tell you is that we can't leave any of the impact indicators which are pertain to the product, which are pertain to the processes for that particular product what we are going to study. Also, for the matter of interest of the stakeholders. Okay, so now we have seen four steps. Now let's go to the fifth step. So after we collect the inventory, then we do the impact assessment through any software for that matter. Then we go to the interpretation of results. This is the key stage of any LCA study. One has to evaluate the results, and very importantly, the very purpose of any study is to find out areas of impact reduction, rather improvement plan. So see, one can understand, the results of a LCA study provide important information about the environmental impacts of a product through its entire life cycle, and this also gives a clear idea of where the major impacts are, and how are we going to interpret, and where are the contributions coming from, which phases are with red flag. So one has to understand all that, then go to the next stage, which is strategizing for key hotspots. So from the fifth stage, we would have earmarked, okay, let's say I've done a LC of a T-shirt where I've really found out that one of the, let's say, a typical manufacturing processes, that's, let's say, if it is from cradle to gate, so that is the most alarming um, phase. So we have found out that what are the contributing factors from that phase. So here at this sixth step, we have to strategize for alleviating these impacts arising from the key hotspots which we have identified in the fifth stage. So here comes reviewing of project plans and assessing the potential environmental impacts of each step of the project which we have defined so far. And here we talk about, okay, what are the stages of product which has really alerted, and what is the plan? How are we going to alleviate the impacts, reduce the impacts in which stages? Again, with short term, long term, or medium term, and what is our plan ahead to reduce these impacts? And what is the strategy we are having ahead? With that, let's go to the seventh step, which is the transition to meet goals. See, we have identified key spots in LCA till sixth stage, right? Now we need to talk about, okay, these are all the hotspots, and we have strategized with all these aspects. How are we going to reduce these impacts, as I mentioned, till sixth step? Here we talk about, to resolve the hotspots, what are the steps one can follow? For example, develop mitigation strategies, implement and monitor the strategies, repeat the process. For example, we have identified the ways to reduce the energy consumption. For example, promoting the use of renewable energy, maybe improving transportation, get rid of packaging, or implement reuse strategies in terms of packaging, or like process level improvements, increase in recycling rate, a closed loop recycling with the water, or zero to waste policy, zero to landfill policy, or you have, let's say, complete wastewater recycling, closed loop recycling of water. The list goes on. So we have to include all that stuff and see, okay, very important aspect is, we have identified all these aspects, we have identified the key hotspots, we have strategized the reduction opportunities. Now what is very important is, okay, what these aspects so far what we have done are going to fetch in terms of the impact reduction. This is very important. So you have to understand, okay, now I have done all these aspects, I have listened to Dr. Muthu's advices. Let's say I have given a list of reduction points, so I've implemented out of 7, maybe I've implemented 4 now. What is the result of these 4 points which I implemented across my supply chain? That's very important. So to find out, okay, in the first step, with with the baseline, so we have measured the footprint, which comes out to, let's say, 10 kilogram CO2 equivalents per kilogram of product, for example. And with all the points implemented, let's say 4 points out of 7, now this is going down to 7. So that is the key, take back conclusion from any LCA study. And please do remember, it's an iterative process. One has to continually assess and track to ensure you are meeting your goals. In simple words, I can say it is as simple as a PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, and act. Right. Now, let's talk about the other important aspect, which is, how can you future proof your impact calculations? What are the best practices one can think of utilizing in your product impact measurement journey? So, of course, I can talk about this for a day. or maybe 2 days. But I'm going to, due to want of time, I'm just going to talk about six key important points one has to follow. First one, be consistent. When I say consistent, in terms of methodology, in terms of standards, and adhere to the recognized standards, such as, let's say, international standards, ISO 14040, 44 for LCA, 67 for product carbon footprint, 14064 for organization carbon footprint, to ensure consistency of results across organizations and industries. This really helps a lot. Second one, be comprehensive. What I mean by terms of being comprehensive is that use methodologies that cover the full life cycle of a product from raw materials to disposal. This will help to understand the intricacies of impacts. What I want to tell you is that don't limit yourself to only confining the study from cradle to gate and come out with a big claim of an eco-friendly product or sustainable product, because we really don't know how the product is going to perform in the rest of the phases. So this is what I'm talking about. Be comprehensive. So being comprehensive really helps to get rid of a lot of issues which might come in terms of greenwashing. Third one, be dynamic. Use dynamic methodologies that take into account of changing circumstances, and of course absolutely make use of emerging technologies to keep up with the evolution of sustainable practices. What I mean to tell you is that, see, when I started, let's say in 2006 7, things were entirely different. Now in 2023, there is a world of differences between what I saw in 2005 2006 with LCA lens and now what I'm saying. So it's most happening. So be dynamic, go with the flow of what all the changes, changing circumstances, and emerging technologies. So this has to be taken into account of. Fourth one, be transparent. One of the biggest pitfalls or shortfalls which I've been witnessing in the sector is the transparency is at stake. Please make sure that the methodology and the data, what you are going to use or what you have used, is openly available and verifiable to promote transparency and accountability. This is the major point. It is not an advice for anyone per se. I would on behalf of the entire industry, I would say this is the key thing which the whole sector has to follow to get rid of all these unwanted issues what we have been hearing with in terms of greenwashing. Fifth one, please go with science-based methodologies. What I mean to say is that use methodologies that are based on the best available science and evidences, including the latest research and advancements in the field. As I already said, this field is quite dynamic. There are a lot of advancements. There are a lot of practices which are emerging every day. Every day is new. So what we saw yesterday, it's no more today. So please make use of science-based methodologies, and you have to update yourself in terms of all these aspects. Last but not least, use reliable data. One of the biggest issues, if you're following my LinkedIn post, you can see I also wrote a post a few months ago, use and misuse of LCA data. The biggest problem is, okay, now if I want to find out my impacts from organic cotton, okay, I'm using organic cotton t-shirt. Oh, I don't want to commission a study. So just Google it, you get some data. This really hampers the entire industry, and this is the biggest issue what the whole industry is facing. This is not absolutely right. You can't do that. Please try to use verified primary data when available, if there is available primary data which is verified, as well as proven. That's very important. Third party verified data sets to fill in the gaps. See, it is not only for the example what I said, just don't Google it. It's not only for that. So when you commission a study, okay, you are in need of, let's say, to fill the data gap, your customer is, your factory is not able to get it. Don't try to fill this with something else, maybe ill-based data, or data which really falls behind reliability. Don't make use of that data. Try to fill this data gap with proven and verified primary data. Maybe you can make use of third-party verified data sets. Today, there are a lot of data sets which are not verified. When we look at, okay, eco invent, Okay, yes, it's verified. You can see a peer review statement. You can see who has reviewed this, and you can see the credibility of the person who has reviewed it. So then you can confide upon what I have used is correct. So so does my results. So that's what is really going to matter in terms of use reliable data, right? Akhil, is that okay? Can you hear me well?
Yes, no
Perfect.
worries. Go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe it would have broken at some points. Apologies for that. Right. So now let's talk about approaching LCAs at scale. See, it is not the peculiar case only for textiles. It is common for any industrial sector for that matter. When we do LCAs are just product based. When I say just product based, if one if you map the entire supply chain for a particular product, and if there is a small variation within the product's attributes, or be it anything in the supply chain, you have to repeat the whole LCA because the whole process is designed in such a way. But is this possible to have this approach when you want to scale? Let's say if someone is talking about measuring LCS for 10,000 products in a short span of time, is that going to be possible? So keeping that in mind, from Green Story, we have innovated an approach which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But before that, I want to talk about what's the standard approach. Generally, the standard approach is people try to analyze each product separately. One can understand it's a cumbersome task when you're, let's say, looking at anything over 50 products. So you can imagine how you are going to scale and how you are going to commission the study for 50 products. There are a lot of challenges which confront this approach, which is higher cost due to data, consultant costs, and very importantly, time frame. And again, given the regulatory targets, uh, you know, can one, is it possible for anyone to afford all these aspects? So that's a $1 million question in front of us. So having said that, from Green Story, we have, as I mentioned, we have innovated a unique approach. With this approach, the data from different stages are stored in data libraries and templates, which can be then deployed across your product lines. So what we do is that we go with supply chain first approach, which reduces time and investment by utilizing and adapting data when possible for each stage of the supply chain. The associated impacts of different stages can be utilized to generate results for the products in the respective supply chains. So with this, one can approach LCS at scale. And again, for companies with larger number of suppliers and very complex supply chains, we typically recommend doing deep dive into some core representative products. This takes, of course, more time, which one has to understand the issues and gaps with us. Then utilizing the learnings from this study, templates and data libraries developed to scale very fast. So the time, just I want to tell you, the time taken for the initial deep dive, let's say if I'm earmarking 10 products, from my library, and I'm going to do LCS for the 10 products, the time taken to do a initial deep dive for these 10 products, it is exactly going to be the same as what is needed for the next 500 related product analysis, and then the next 5,000. This is how we are going to approach the scaling aspect with LCS, right? So with all this background, now I'm going to talk about greenwashing. I think it doesn't need any introduction. Everyone knows about what is greenwashing. Um, I'm going to talk about what is greenwashing, what are the causes and examples. I'm going to give few examples and what are the issues around this greenwashing. So everyone knows it's a term used to describe the practice of making false or misleading or unsubstantiated claims about the environmental benefits of a product, be it product, service, or company. It is form of environmental marketing that aims to deceive consumers into thinking that a product is more environmentally friendly than it really is. That's a problem. So what happens is that it really mislead consumers on environmental benefits of a product. And what I've seen so far, and everyone understands, is that most of the cases it can be unintentional. But again, greenwashing is greenwashing, and it can occur for various reasons, including lack of regulations, competition, peer pressure, misaligned incentives, lack of consumer awareness, lack of transparency. So these are the major reasons which are contributing to greenwashing. Again, with the in conclusion, I want to say greenwashing can occur for a variety of reasons, including competition, misaligned incentives, and a lack of regulation, consumer awareness, and transparency, as I mentioned before. It is important for consumers, companies, very importantly, also for regulators to work together to prevent greenwashing and promote genuine efforts to improve sustainability. And that's why we are all gathered here to talk about how can we get rid of this. And there are several issues one has to understand with greenwashing, which includes misleading claims. It creates ample amount of confusions, unwanted confusions among consumers about what is truly environmental friendly and what is not, and undermines genuine efforts. This is the major issue which greenwashing is going to create. Then regulatory issues. And again, for example, just to give a company may use terminologies such as eco-friendly or sustainable without any third-party verification scheme or by any established public authority scheme, or using claims from suppliers without getting verified to unintentionally greenwash. This is what is really happening. So, the causes and examples look like: to draw attention away from their negative environmental impact, to differentiate themselves from the rest of the competition and to improve their public image, can be done in, let's say, advertising, packaging, or labeling, both intentionally and unintentionally. So I just gave you an example. Generally these phrases have to be really prevented. One cannot use eco-friendly or sustainable, and there are a lot of claims based on ISO 1402X series of standards. There are a lot of terminologies which are allowed, there are a lot of terminologies which are not allowed. So one has to make use of all that, and if you want to come up with the definition of, let's say, a claim, there are a lot of steps one has to follow before we are damn sure about what is the claim we are talking about. Okay, once you have a bulletproof and a robust methodology behind what you claim, then it is not greenwashing. Then you don't have to worry about this. And for that, you have to follow all the steps what we have covered so far. With that, now let's talk about regulations. EU principles and regulations. And you all know, regulations are getting tightened every day. Again, I'm not going to talk about what are the different regulations coming from entire globe. The reason is that these regulations keep revolving, as I mentioned before. So as the process technologies, these regulations are also keep evolving. So I'm going to talk about what are all the major principles one has to align with in terms of following the regulations. See, the biggest challenge we might face is that, okay, today we are lingering towards one regulation. Maybe tomorrow that will absolutely change. So what I want to tell, and I've been advising the same for almost a decade, is that just go with the scientifically proven methodologies as such as ISO methods, and make use of all the robust aspects what we mentioned about in terms of data, in terms of the approach, in terms of transparency, in terms of openly disclosing the data sources. Be transparent about all these methodologies, all these aspects what you have followed in terms of coming to the point of what you are going to climb. So that is what is going to really help you with facing any regulation for that matter. So for that, I'm going to talk about four important aspects. One is durability. So any regulation, and of course from the EU side, this is prohibited. Like if you make false claim about durability of your product and omitting the information limiting a product's durability, this is absolutely not allowed. So if you follow scientific methodologies what we discussed so far, you can absolutely get rid of that. Next one, vague claims. We already spoke about that. There is a prohibition of making generic environmental claims such as, let's say, environmental friendly, This is absolutely not right. So when you say environmental friendly, you can see how weird it sounds like. Eco, sustainable, bio-based, or even organic. So these kind of vague claims are not allowed. Then, scope, prohibition on making environmental claim about the entire product when it actually concerns only a certain aspect of the product. We talked about this before. You are really measuring only from cradle to gate, but you are making a claim as if you have done for the entire life cycle. That's not allowed. So which scope you have really done your study, please speak about what is the claim or what is the benefit pertain to the scope which you have really studied. So don't generalize your scope, which is not allowed, which is prohibited. Last but not least, labels. Prohibition to display a sustainable label that is not based on a certification scheme or not established by public authorities. So when you want to make your claim, let's say you are measuring a product carbon footprint of a product, or you have reduced, so you want to claim that my product is bestowed with carbon reduction or carbon neutral or whatever it is, you have to follow the aspects of, let's say, certification scheme or any method for that matter established by public authorities, be it label, be it mark, the same regulations will apply. And when you talk about substantiating claims, there are a lot of rules clarified on type of green claims that can be made and tied EU-wide product environmental footprint methodology, PF 3.0. We are also going to get the new version. So one has to follow all these aspects to get rid of greenwashing. And again, I just want to conclude that whatever regulations which are going to come from any part of the world, as long as you follow the scientific principles, robust methodology, transparency, then you can face any regulation which is going to come at any point of time. So with that, I'm going to talk about what is our approach. I would say Green Story's robust approach to avoid greenwashing. So as Akhil mentioned, we have been in the space for quite long time, and we really wanted to get rid of greenwashing. So we have developed a robust approach to completely get rid of greenwashing. So we begin with first part is rigorous data collection. We advise our customers to first think of getting primary data to go with the LCA studies. Of course, not always it's possible. In case we try our best to get primary data for all our studies. If not, then we will try to fill the gaps only with the secondary data. And we have devised three scale approach in terms of looking at the LCA studies. One is comprehensive LCS. This is mainly coming with primary with data benchmarked with industrial standards. Second one is screening LCA. Again, not always one can aim to get a comprehensive LCA study with the primary data. So at times, we need to really go with screening LCA. This comes with the mainly secondary data sets, which are again localized from us using primary data from brands. Third, which is hybrid LCS. Here we talk about deep dive into few key stages and further complemented by secondary data sets. So this is how we approach the subject in terms of rigorous data collection. Next is the usage of validated datasets. I talked about this before. In Green Story, we are very firm about this aspect. So we will use only proven primary data by the clients. And of course, we will fill the gaps with the secondary data from peer-reviewed studies and only third-party certified and verified datasets. We don't make use of any other data apart from what I mentioned here. So we'll go with validated primary data. Even when the client is giving primary data to us, we will validate every single digit. Without getting validated, we will not accept and enter into the models. This is the first one. And this really helps to get the most accurate results. Second one, of course, if primary data is not available, not always 100% you can do LCA study with primary data. It is, of course, not going to be possible. You need to fill the gaps, to varying percentages. In case if primary data is not available, we will use most representative secondary data sets, again, which are consistent with geography and the processes under question. Third, whatever data sources we use, data points we cover, we will mention all the data sources and we will call out all the sources openly and transparently in our reports. And talking about the methodology, we devised a methodology called baselining. So we define this as baselining to look at marginal savings or impacts from the specific supply chain. We we don't use comparative assertions. So just to get rid of comparative assertions, we defined baselining methodology. So what we do with baselining is whatever supply chains we measure, each supply chain which is baseline with an identical supply chain that is geographically consistent. So this is our unique approach with which we are able to address the major issues which are prevailing in terms of comparative assertions. Next, validation for claims. Most of our customers are come with a lot of claims. They come with, okay, I'm using renewable energy. I'm using, I have a closed loop water recycling. My product is biodegradable product. My product is organic cotton. My product is recycled one. So whatever it is, whatever claims our customers are bringing on board, we will absolutely get it validated with valid proofs, which are either being calculated or validated by other third parties or by us, failing which we don't accept, we will use conventional defaults. And last but not least, review mechanism. We of course the review mechanism comes with many folds. I'm going to talk about, let's say, we do have a internal review mechanism for secondary data sorry, I mean screening LCA studies. And for primary LCA for primary data based comprehensive LCAs, we really vet our studies for third party critical review. And we do have a policy internally that all studies undergo an internal peer review, be it screening, hybrid, or comprehensive, to assure the credibility of such studies. Even if it is going to be a third party critical review, all our studies will go to a filter of internal peer review, then only it will go to a third party critical review for comprehensive primary data based studies. And based on the client request, sometimes screening LCs also we wait for third party critical reviews. With that, I will leave the floor to Akhil to talk about the further steps. Akhil.
Thank you, Dr. Muthu, and thank you for walking us through the presentation. It's definitely a lot to cover, and I would say that there is absolutely a book that can be written about it. Maybe it's your 151st book on this, but uh, there is a lot in terms of next steps that we can do. I see there's a lot of interest from companies in general around how to scale up the technology and how to ensure that you can get to 5,000. As Dr. Muthu said, our approach is to start small and go big really quickly. And it is enabled by the Green Story platform and technology. And there is going to be a follow-up webinar on this in about the month's time. So please keep a lookout onto your emails, and we'll be reaching out to you if you're interested, and we'll go from there. So in the meantime, if you have any kind of further comments or questions, feel free to reach out to me directly at akhil@greenstory.io. We'll also be having a longer webinar with a QA session as part of the next step with us on how the Green Story technology is enabling companies to have LCAs at scale. So thank you so much for attending, everyone. Really appreciate all
Thank
your
you very much.
inputs and your attendance, and looking forward to the next one. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.